Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Deep Dive Film School uses the footage only for purposes of education, commentary, and criticism under fair use. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School.
This week we are going to begin our You Should See This festival with 2017's A Ghost Story.
Let's dive right in. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And please, if you like what you see /hear, please like and subscribe. All of our spaces and places are down below.
Yeah, and for those podcast people, DDFS Podcast or Deep Dive Film School, and most anything except for stupid Facebook.
Yep.
Thanks, stupid Facebook.
Thanks, stupid Facebook. All right, so as we mentioned at the end of last week's episode, this is a carryover, a fossil, an artifact from our old show, which is... I don't see nearly enough movies. You, on the other hand, see so many movies.
Yes, I don't sleep.
It's because you don't sleep. I know you see so many movies and you have kids. I'm like, I don't know how he does it. But what you do over time...
You see movies. You just see the same movies over and over.
I mean, look... There's some movies you really want to get to the bottom of, and sometimes a movie like Poltergeist has certain nuances.
I agree with that.
That the first 35 times you watched it, you may have missed.
Wonderful movie.
Yeah, it is a wonderful film. Right. Yeah, there you go. And you can't see her Tangina's up there, but
oh yeah, she is.
Yeah, this house is clean.
This house is clean.
Anyway.
Yes.
Tangential. Anyway.
Yes.
When you see all these movies, are you putting little file things next to them and saying, "Ooh, that might be a good one to do for the show," or do you usually just like think of them like split second when we decide to do one of the?
No, I definitely consider things like I consider it like, oh, I want to watch this. When I watch this again, I want to watch it with my wife or something like that. So I definitely put them in a file in my brain. It's not like an actual file, but
yeah, you have an actual file in your living room. Don't touch this. That's for our little show.
I know I have this nice Mac over here, but I'm gonna use this filing cabinet just for these.
For my podcast. for my YouTube series.
My little show. Well, this week I chose this one. This is one I saw at Sundance originally back in 2017, and it was one that was very divisive. When we were leaving the theater, lots of people were like, well, that was a waste of 2 hours. And I get that, because this movie definitely is not for everybody. You have to have patience. You have to, this is not your traditional movie. I think
it really isn't.
It's
it really isn't.
Unlike a lot of things I've seen. And it was a very brave, ambitious movie.
It's meditative in a really interesting and strange way.
It really is, very differently. I think a lot of that has to do with the actual how we view the ghost in this movie. Let's get into it. The movie is A Ghost Story.
Directed by David Lowery.
David Lowery. He did Ain't Them Bodies Saints, which I don't think I've seen.
I haven't seen
I have seen Pete's Dragon, though.
I was going to say, like, what is this weird thing where these, like, kind of artsy-fartsy directors end up doing things like Pete's Dragon? I'm always like, what?
Yeah, and
what is that?
And I'm going to talk about this in our episode next week, because our director next week does the same thing, and it's what I like to call Disney safe movies, right? The ones that are like easy. They have a formula. They know exactly what they need. You put your own little flair on it, but whatever. But
just a bit.
Just a bit.
You put more than a bit on it, and it turns into The Last Jedi, and people hate you.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's true. So he directed Pete's Dragon, so he had money to make this movie. Which, if you're gonna do that, I'm all for it. Like,
totally. Oh yeah. It's like a Crispin Glover thing, right? Like he made all of his weird movies by the paycheck from things like Charlie's Angels.
For sure.
Yeah.
And this movie only cost $100,000 to make, which is pretty fascinating. That's a pretty low budget movie these days. From a director who's directing Disney movies. Like,
well,
good for him.
Also to see how much it cost, like $100,000, and then I was like, so you somehow still got Casey Affleck to be underneath that sheet for like 99% of the movie? I'm like, why weren't you like, hey, Casey, we need you for like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you can just go.
I mean,
we'll still give you top billing, but
yeah, I wonder if it's him that whole time.
apparently it is.
Yeah,
apparently
I read that
it's
as well,
him
so.
almost the entire time. They had, I want to say it was the DP did stand-ins when they had to do
That's
reshoots.
right. No, it was the director.
Was it the director?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the money from Pete's Dragon went to this. The other movie that he made that I think is absolutely fantastic that got swept under the rug last year was Robert Redford and Sissy Spacek, The Old Man and the Gun.
Old Man and the Gun, that's
excellent,
right.
Excellent, so good movie. I fucking love that movie. I bought it immediately after I watched it because I'm like, that's just a classic. It's just like, how did this go?
I wondered about that
because I really liked that.
Well,
one.
and I thought that was weird that it didn't go. I assumed it must have not been good because it's Redford.
Yeah, it's
and
really
like
good.
he's
and it's
this
guy
and it's Robert Redford. He's almost gone.
and this
we
guy-
should be cherishing anything that the guy does.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
And it is really quality stuff too. Him and Sissy Spacek. And
I'll have to check it out.
Who else? Casey Affleck is in this one. Is in his one. So obviously that's kind of his muse.
Oh yeah,
because
because he's in the Body Saints.
So all
right?
he really needs for this movie is to sell the actors on it because there's really only like 2 actors in this movie.
2 actors and Bonnie Prince Billy.
And Bonnie Prince Billy, Will Oldham, and we'll get to his character in a minute. But obviously Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara. Now this movie, I walked out of it, and I didn't hate it, but there's a scene in here, and I've talked about it before when I've tried to pitch this movie to you, and there's a scene that's going to make or break people. Like, yeah, it starts off pretty slow, and it's pretty slow and methodical and on purpose, but you're also like, don't know what kind of movie this is going to like. It's a ghost story, right? You assume it's going to be some kind of scary, some kind of haunting. What's going on? What kind of movie am I getting? Am I getting a haunted house movie? What's going on, I don't know what this movie's turning into.
Right, and then one of our main characters dies within like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, a ghost story.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting.
It is
yeah.
very like, so let's get straight to it. I mean, he essentially dies, and Rooney Mara goes to the hospital, and
But before he dies, they have a conversation about how their house might be haunted.
yeah.
Right? The piano's making weird noises in the middle of the night.
Yeah, that's one of the first scenes.
Yeah, we're sort of, so it is setting up this idea of it being a haunted house
that's
story.
That's what I mean. Like,
Yep,
you don't
yep.
quite know what this movie's going to be. So there's slow moments, and then there's this one moment that is a very long, extended scene. Some would deem unnecessarily long, but we can talk about it. I want to talk about that scene. We definitely will. I think we have to. But this movie, it was one of those that just sat with me and the more it sat with me, I'm like, God damn, that was genius. And it really has become, the more I've thought about it, especially over this last few days since I've watched it, it's like, if you're looking for a truly original piece of work, this is it.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
This movie has Sherlock written all over it. Let's hear what you have to say.
So yes, I can completely understand how this would be divisive, and I can understand how people that were wanting something more traditional were probably left, wanting more.
Yeah.
I found this movie fascinating and frustrating.
Really?
I found it really fascinating. I think the ideas that it's talking about here, I think that it's really funny. David Lowery, in an interview basically said that he started from a single image in his mind that he couldn't get rid of. And it was a person walking around as a ghost with just the traditional sheet, Charlie Brown sheet with the holes cut in it for eyes, right?
Yep.
But that person was really a ghost. And he's like, and I didn't know anything else. I didn't know what else this movie was going to be. And that the more he started thinking about like, well, okay, like if I was seeing things from the perspective of a ghost. And so that's where he really started to go out into these threads, some of those threads being, the longer you're a ghost, are you forgetting who you used to be, right? Are you forgetting what your life used to be? Are you only remembering little bits and pieces of it? And then he thought, as an artist, what would it mean to be a ghost? And that's where this real central thread, this kind of through line about, the kind of ethereal nature of the stuff we create, right? Like I've always said, you and I have joked about this, like, either one of us dies, they could literally play probably about 2 months worth of podcasts on a reel of our voices without ever having repeated, right? Because there's so many years worth of content that we've created. And that as artists, you create lots of content. And obviously this central theme that happens in the party that Will Oldham's character talks about is really kind of the central crux of that.
No doubt.
And all of that stuff to me is so fascinating. The fact that in our third act, time seems to double back on itself in some strange way, and the echoes of our themes start to play both way into the future, this sort of futuristic Blade Runner-ish sci-fi future, as well as all the way back into like an early settler pioneer past.
Yeah.
That stuff's fascinating to me, and it makes me so sad to say that these takes that you're talking about, these really long drawn out takes, I'm never this guy. I'm never the guy that sits back and goes, well, I don't get it.
I know.
Right? I'm never that guy.
Yeah.
And here, when it started doing that, and it starts doing that, obviously I can
appreciate it to a point.
The morgue scene is a big one, and then the second one that's really a big one is the pie eating scene.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And at the time, I was tied in because I was like, I don't know what's happened. I don't know where this is going.
Yeah.
As it started introducing more interesting ideas, I was going, what? Why did we waste all that time on dead air, meditative, I don't know what's, when you had all this really cool stuff to say? Like, you had all this really cool stuff to say that starts to happen later on and later on. Mm-hmm. And the more I thought about that, and I have been thinking about this movie a lot over the last couple of days, but the more that I've been thinking about it, the more frustrated it's made me at those early scenes, because I'm like, maybe there is some super symbolic purpose for those scenes, but okay, let's say this.
She's obviously mourning.
She's in mourning, and that's fine. But you know what? 20 seconds of mourning, you can get it across, right? But where you're at 90 seconds, 2 minutes of pretty much nothing.
It's 4 minutes, actually.
Good criminy. 4 minutes. I mean, 4 minutes. How long is Will Oldham's speech about transcendentalism, right? It's probably about 4 minutes, right? This feeling of like our fleeting nature as human beings. Like, that's a really important 4 minutes. I would say the morgue scene, because we do sit after she leaves.
Morgue scene seems more necessary to
That's
me
interesting.
than the eye scene.
That's interesting to me, because once he sits up, we are shocked. We're like, oh my God, right? So there's payoff to that one. There's also payoff to the one.
Let me rebuttal real quick with the long scenes. I think that it is testing the audience more than anything.
But what's the purpose of testing the audience?
I think the grand scheme of looking at time, how you value your time, how you use your time, like what time means in the big grand scheme of things. But I think it's testing the audience, letting you know, like, this isn't going to be your normal movie. Because there's other movies, I believe, that have long, unnecessary scenes. This one stood out. The pie one definitely stood out. That, to me, is the make or break scene for someone who's watching this, if they're bought in, if they're ready to go, or if it's like, no.
Yeah, I guess I can just see those kinds of scenes in something like a Jim Jarmusch film where the whole, like, you kind of knew ahead of time, you buckled in for that because that's what it was going to be. And not to say that Jim Jarmusch films don't have interesting things to say, they definitely do. But it's a quirkiness that, in his case, I can kind of just accept and either find value in it or get around it, right? Like, I can find value in it in Dead Man, and I can get around it in, Coffee and Cigarettes, right? Whereas here, what you just said about the perception of time, that's very interesting. It's definitely interesting. But I didn't feel that. I just felt frustrated. And I would say the morgue scene, the fact that the punchline at the end of it is that he sits up, makes that wait worth it. I would say later on, when all of a sudden our ghost is in this prairie, that's a really long one-shot scene also, where he's just following around this pioneer who's putting stakes in the ground. And I'm like, that's also interesting, because we're like, where is he? What's happening?
Well,
we don't know, right?
He's in the exact same
Exactly,
spot.
but it takes us a minute to realize that. And so, like, that also, the length of that feels worth it. Whereas the pie eating one, and then also the woman leaving her the pie, both of those just felt like spinning our wheels compared to so many more interesting things that happen later.
If you just took out those 2 pie scenes, you would love this movie.
I think so.
I get where you're going. That's why I said at the very beginning, this is not for everyone. It's
half the
theater walked out.
So I love what it was saying. There are some scary scenes in it. After his wife moves out of the house, the next people who move in is this Hispanic woman and her 2 children. And he as the ghost is sort of like, that's when we truly understand that time is slipping from him. We understand it a little bit when it's still him and his wife. We see that this cyclical kind of action is happening. And so it's nice to be like, oh, wow, is time slipping away from him? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, these people are here to look at the house. Bam, they've moved in. Bam, it's Christmas. One thing after another after another.
Then it starts moving, yeah.
And
you realize he's stuck.
And I really liked that stuff. I would have preferred more of that. I would have liked to have seen more people living in that house,
going through his life. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the visual of the ghost figure going through these things cannot be understated enough about how unique and effective and strange it is to see this, because
it's very strange.
It is just this normal trope that you see. You don't even see it in movies anymore because it's all computer animated.
Yeah,
maybe in fucking Beetlejuice or something.
Yeah, otherwise like you would not have a person under a sheet like this.
For the most part, it's a Halloween costume.
Totally.
Right? And the fact that he used that to me, like, it changes the whole way the story's being told.
It's incredibly unique. And I also think that the sheet with the eye holes is really, there's such small amounts of movement, tilts of the head, turning to look at things, looking back at things, that it is almost this Rorschach test for us to try and see, like, what is it that the ghost has picked up on, right? And at what point, and it's a really interesting concept of, well, okay, here we go, really quick. Do you believe in ghosts?
No.
I don't. I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember. It's an author who said this, but the answer is no. But ask me at 1 o'clock in the morning when all the lights are out. Right? I know that I've paraphrased that, but sometimes, yeah. But the one thing that I love about the idea of ghosts, it's fine. Let's say I want to believe. The world would be much more fun if they were real.
Yeah, for
the world would be way more interesting, or way more sad if you are the ghost, as is the case in this movie. But I think one of the things about that, the lore,
a Frightener situation out there somewhere that can be,
yeah, and they're all just hanging out, living in a house together.
Yeah.
No, but I was gonna say that, like, the lore that this movie works with, I think, is one that's pretty well-worn territory. This idea that you think about
it
people,
seems wholly unique.
Well, it is, except for this idea. If you think about people who have said that they've had an encounter with a haunting, or they've moved into a place that's haunted or something like that, that oftentimes a thing that they saw, this ghost, this thing that they saw, doesn't really know where it's at, or it's caught in some kind of a loop, right? Where it's doing a thing over and over, and like it can't stop doing this one thing.
Yeah.
And our ghost here, our Casey Affleck ghost, it seems like after everything else about his identity has been stripped away, the only thing that he can remember is that his wife has left a note stuck in the wall.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, he has nothing else, right? There's nothing else that he has. So the only thing that he remembers is that.
Also, he can't really die either. He tried killing himself.
Yeah, he can't do anything.
He can't do that
either.
He
can't do any of it. And so that's what I'm kind of saying is I love that part of it actually fits in pretty tried and true with the mythos of hauntings, right? As it's like, you're stuck here again, to go back to Poltergeist and Tangina, right? Like, they don't know that they're dead. They don't know that they can move on. And we even see this early on where he sees the light and he goes, and he doesn't go through the doorway of light in the hospital. He goes down the hall and he goes back to his old house.
Oh, you mean the door that opens?
Yeah, it's like it's like that in the wall.
Boy, does he regret not walking through there?
Yeah,
after a while.
Yeah, 300 years later. Oh no, what have I done?
Yeah. You know, I mean, you're gonna lose some people in this movie. I think to go back to the long shots that you were talking about real quick. Do you think it has anything to do with this movie having very little dialogue? The Bonnie Prince Jr. speech is twice as long as all of our main actors combined. His speech there. So, you know, this movie goes a long time without anything being said. So, do the scenes seem longer because of that? Do you think? Because there's no... I mean, really, Rooney Mara says...
10 lines?
Yeah, like 40 words the whole movie?
It could be, but I didn't... That's a really interesting idea. I don't know if it did.
Most of this movie is silent.
Most of this movie is silent.
85% of it.
Yeah. No, those are the only times that I felt like there was drag. Those are the only times that I felt like I didn't notice things kind of moving along. Because I think that, you know, like I said, I think all the times that there are things for the ghost to really be observing that are happening, that are kind of taking us from one moment to another, are really interesting and really provocative.
I really like him as a director. I'm really interested in to see what he does more. I love this, and I love Old Man and Gun. He loves shooting in doorways, if you didn't notice. Like, every other shot was in a
let's talk
doorway.
about the aspect ratio here.
Yeah, the 133 aspect ratio. Yeah, he said it was because it's basically about somebody being trapped in a box for eternity. So that's why I did that.
There were moments
that's a
where
good reason.
I was going, is it shrinking? There were totally moments where I was like, is the aspect... Because
it looks beautiful. It's a beautiful movie.
Well, and you know, to go to your point about, like, this being such a different movie, I did think that the aspect ratio at one point was shrinking, and in my head I went, if it is, I believe it, like because if a movie was going to do that, it's this movie. I really like when it was very interesting to me when time starts to slip back onto itself. All of a sudden, he's gone so far into the future. You know, they've torn down the houses.
Well, and that's when we have to mention, we haven't mentioned this yet, but the neighbor ghost.
The second ghost.
So funny.
It's so funny, but it also is kind of one of the scariest parts of the movie. It's very, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but it is actually haunting. It is very haunting to see this other ghost and the other...
Like, who are you here for? I don't remember.
I'm like, that's... Yeah.
And they talk in subtitles.
Subtitles.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It's very strange.
To me, it was a little bit of comic relief because this is already kind of silly looking.
Yeah.
But you're trying to believe it, and then you throw in more of it, and it's just. But
it's also spooky. It's also spooky to be like, oh, there's a ghost in that house too. They're everywhere, right?
Exactly.
So
pretty fascinating.
It goes so far into
the house gets knocked down that you're talking about.
It goes so far into the future because now they built this high rise. You know, the other ghost evaporates, right?
Yep.
Then they build this high rise, and that's where all of a sudden we're like way into the future. And then, as you said, he tries to kill himself. He jumps, and then all of a sudden he's in the past. And I think that this is such an interesting concept, and I wish
we're not in caveman times either. We jump to like
settlers,
pioneer settlers.
Yeah, settlers.
Yeah.
And I wish it would have played with this more because there's two super interesting things that happen once we're back in these settler times.
Yes.
He comes across this family, and it's a mom and a dad and then two little girls. And the second interesting thing that happens is that as they're getting ready to leave, the little girl writes something down on a piece of paper and hides it under a rock.
Yeah.
A la his wife.
Yeah.
The first that I was like, did that really happen? And I had to actually go back and watch that scene again a second time to make sure, is that the little, I don't know if it's the same little girl or the other little girl, is humming the song that he wrote.
She is.
Which...
Doesn't
to then rewind again back to the Will Oldham scene, that he makes reference to something like that. He's like, when society's gone, and then we're back to hunter-gatherers, and then one person will hum one part of a Beethoven symphony, and then all of a sudden we'll have the riches of the arts back again. But it still won't matter because the sun is going to eat the earth, and right. I mean, he's talking about the big crunch. He's talking about all these ideas of like, what's even the point of making art? Because if the idea is that you stay alive until one day everyone that knows you is dead, well, guess what? That day still will come. So why did you make art to begin with? Why are you even going to bother writing your book?
I think it talks to the power of inspiration a little bit there too.
Yeah, but it's like it's
in
also
a condescending way.
Maybe because it's almost like he's doing both, right? He's being condescending, but at the same time he's also kind of kicking you in the ass to be like,
no, I agree.
To do it is to do it, right? And that legacy, it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't. Like, so if you have a painting to paint, like, you better just get your ass in gear and paint it, whether or not anybody ever sees it, because you're making art because you're an artist.
Yeah.
But this then, this then throws into that either time travel or a splitting of multiple realities, multiple dimensions, right? Because how is the one daughter repeating what his wife did, and why does the other girl know his song unless the ghost is? But also, how is he even there?
Yeah.
Right. And then
maybe he did start in caveman times. That's just where they decided to show us in the movie where he was.
And then to put an even finer point onto it, he then stays in that exact same spot and sees himself and his wife renting the house.
Yeah.
And then
we loop back around.
We loop back around, and he is the ghost that's haunting them. But then in some straight up Marty McFly shit,
totally.
He sees himself as the ghost after he's already died, and she's leaving, and he doesn't have enough of a reaction. You're like, he doesn't remember that's him as the ghost now. The only thing he remembers is he's got to get that stupid note out of the wall. It's the only vestige of his self that's even left.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that stuff to me. So you can see how excited I am now talking about this part of it. That's what frustrates me about the first half. Because I'm like, why did we waste 3 minutes watching her struggle to drag a dresser out to the curb when later on we're going through
space and time
and wormholes and like, the purpose of the artistic soul.
I think it was a lot about the relationship, obviously.
Sure, and that's fine. Yeah. I can totally get on board with that stuff. But
I'm with you. I had the same feelings when I walked out, but the ending was so good. And the more I've watched it and know that's coming and know kind of what to expect, I enjoy it worlds more.
And I'm not saying that I need stuff spoon-fed to me. I'm not that kind of a person, but this was one of those. There are those rare times where I'm like, I don't get it. Whatever this part's for, I don't get it. What are we doing? Why are we watching her eat a whole pie with her hands? Why are we doing that? I get it. Grief is grief, and it sucks. At the same time, I also saw Anna Paquin basically do the exact same thing like 3 years before this in an episode of True Blood. I don't know if you remember that scene.
It was like 45 seconds.
It was like 45 seconds long, but she was sad because her grandma died, and she got the pie out of the freezer, and she ate the whole thing with her hands. And I'm like, she's fucking grieving! Yeah. And then we moved on.
I do think there's something to test in the audience a little bit. They're
sure,
I think there's a breaking point.
Everybody gets the right to test whatever they want.
Yeah.
I'm like, your
movie got a little too much Malick for you.
If the rest, whatever, I would have. If he could have thrown in a CGI dinosaur breakdancing in front of her eating that pie, I would have signed up for the whole thing. More dinosaurs, Malick. Throw in some more dinosaurs.
I love this movie. I've grown to love this movie. I think it's
incredibly interesting.
It is. It's fascinating. If you want an original watch, please go watch this movie because
agreed.
I think it's just one of those. And again, it's divisive, but I don't think in a bad way.
No, not at all. In fact, if the rest of it had been as slow, I would have been able to just be like, yeah, wow, that thing was a trip. But instead, it turned into something I liked so much that I'm way more critical about the beginning.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah, no, the ending made it a great movie. It was good, and you're like, I don't know where this is going, but the ending made it a great movie.
Yeah.
Once we start passing through time at a fast pace. I agree with you. I wish we had more of that stuff. But I do think there's something to say about someone who's willing to try this and willing to push someone with their art to see how far they'll go to accept this great, cool ending, I guess. Totally get it from a movie going experience. Get that part completely.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, if you liked what you saw / heard,
both.
Yeah, either one. Do both.
Or
we
both.
Got YouTube,
try
we
both.
We got YouTube. We got Instagram. We got Facebook, Twitter. We do all this stuff.
We're on all the spaces, all the places.
I don't know why it's so painfully awkward to self-promote ourselves, but it is.
I don't know. It just is. Well, that's why we have a banner.
Yeah, that's.
We don't have to say anything. We can just be like,
for the people listening.
Oh, that's fair. You guys can't see the banner.
No, they can't.
Well, anyway.
And your Vanna White.
I know. You're missing all my gestures. I've been working on my gestures.
YouTube, but we understand we're going to keep posting the podcast, no problem at all.
Yeah, everybody consumes media differently, as you always say.
Yes.
All
right. Well, thank you very much. Next week we are going to do I, Tonya.
Yep.
And what else is on the fest? We got Roma and Moonlight.
Yes.
Excited for all of those. We will see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys. Okay. Do you want to do the honors? Perfect.
Do we want to keep going? Hey.
Now it's back to you.
Steel drum.
Yeah. Now back to you. And then back to me.
Nope. Do we got anything to talk about?
I brought the snapping gig, so I don't know.
The guy I brought.
If you don't like that, I got nothing else for you.
I do. I just only have so much talent.
You only have so many? Can you do the
No, I can't do that this way, though.
Yeah. Did you get sad when you started to grow armpit hair and you couldn't do it quite as effectively?
No. You know why?
Why?
Because you can just do it under your knees like this.
Oh,
you get double the sound, double the quickness.
Oh, yeah, it's rapid fire. It's like the way a human never would be able to.
Exactly.
Wow.
Let alone I did.
Yeah, I bet you were really popular at summer camp.
I didn't go to summer camp.
You never went to a summer camp?
No.
I only went to one.
Was it just like Porky's?
No, because it was a Cub Scout camp.
Yeah, I don't know.
It was called Lame Beaver, and I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Yeah. There was like 6 different little camps, and the one that we were at was called Lame Beaver. And I was like, you could have named it anything, because I do not believe that Lame Beaver is like oh no, that's what the Algonquin named this lake, so many hundreds of years ago. It's like no.
All those names from Wet Hot American Summer.
Yeah,
they're
Lame Beaver.
Lame Beaver is better than all of them. Right.